Welcome back to Story Hustler. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Mike.
Like and subscribe and share with your friends if you haven't already. We've taken a little bit of a break, like a couple months or so.
Yeah.
But we have been very busy covering a story that seems to be the only story that we talk about nowadays.
Yeah, but now it is really all coming to a head.
It really is. So what we are talking about is the Samuel Bateman case
Yeah.
and the FLDS Church. He's the Renegade Prophet, as we have named them.
So dubbed him.
Yeah, and if you don't know the story, we're going to kind of like do a snapshot of it and then get into kind of what's to come in the future, which is the trials of all of these people. But basically, in December of 2021, Samuel Bateman reached out to you,
Yes.
wanting to meet Mike Watkins and the Queen of England.
That's what Sam's
Sam
introduction to me
He was
was.
like, I need to meet Mike Watkins and the Queen of England. God told me to do this, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
We've talked about it in past episodes. But you reluctantly agreed to meet him.
Very reluctantly.
Yeah, and when you showed up to a public park, which is what you had agreed upon.
I didn't know if this guy wanted to punch me, sermonize with me, convert me, or blood atone me.
Yeah, well, Warren has a hit on you still, so
yeah,
could have been all of the above.
It could have been all of the above.
But you reluctantly meet him at this park, and he shows up with two young men, and all of his, as he described them, ladies. Yeah. And it was about 20 women.
Well, it was about 25. I think it was nearly 24 women and girls. And
yeah.
This is where there's a scene in Godfather 3 where Al Pacino is talking about getting pulled back into the mafia. And I was retired, and you were doing other things, but we got two phone calls that really pulled us back into this story. And one of the phone calls was from Sam Bateman talking to me. It was right before Christmas in 2021. Guy starts calling me and asking for a meeting. We're going to talk more about that, but we want to share for the first time. We have nowhere has this ever been broadcast. It's a clip from this meeting in the park. And again, I went down there thinking I was going to meet this guy. He shows up with 24 women. And his agenda, it's his meeting, his agenda is to have these women sing me some religious hymns. And it all played out at a Phoenix Park where I agreed because I thought it would be safe there.
Yeah.
And
you brought backup.
I did. I took your brother and Sarah, our daughter-in-law. But it was anyhow, it was a bizarre scene. We want to share with you for the first time ever a clip of the singing, and then we'll talk more.
Our mighty God has given us so much good to find. There's just no room for darkness in our lives, if there isn't.
So, as you can see, that was a rather bizarre scene that you found yourself in the middle of.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, having covered this story for so long, obviously it probably just set off every red flag that you could think of, seeing this scene of not just women, but what appeared to be underage girls.
Oh, yeah, they were underage girls.
They are, now that we know now.
Holding babies, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't know who this guy was, and didn't want this meeting, so I just sort of stumbled into hoping to get this guy off my case and figure out why this guy was so obsessed with me. Mm-hmm. He puts on this display with and he referred to them as his ladies. As soon as I saw the women and children piling out of these vans, when I got there, it was just Sam and these two guys, and suddenly the women started piling in, and my blood went cold because it really set off every red flag of everything I've ever covered for 40 years. And so as soon as this meeting was over, I came back and we started covering this story 2.5 years ago. Immediately after my meeting, we got sort of up to speed on who Sam was, and I contacted sources of mine, and they said everything that you suspect is going on, and more. And so I'm horrified now, and some of the people I talked to indicate that law enforcement has already been notified.
And you also notified them. You reached out to the FBI and made sure to do that right away, and they were like, we've been made aware of this guy.
Well, they didn't.
They didn't say anything, but they kind of were like, yeah, we'll take it. We'll look at it. They couldn't obviously say anything about what they were doing, but we have been, I guess we've been told that they were working on it
Right. And
since.
well, and
So,
that's the
but it's
was
hard with these cases because, I mean, as you saw with Warren, and we've like talked to the mayor who's currently the mayor of that town, and
of
she
Hildale.
described this. But with Warren, like you
You
needed
did
cold,
prove,
hard evidence, and it's hard to get all of that sometimes when you're going up to these religious groups and you're
oh,
asking them.
they're not open. They're not
No,
going to
they don't
tell you the
talk to the
truth.
world, so
Yeah, and so what we came to sort of realize that there is a real timetable to this story, and I think so you understand, and so we're clear on this. We started covering this story basically in late 2021, and now it's really all exploded in federal court, and we've talked about some of this. And next month,
yeah,
two of Sam's male followers, a young man named Torrance Beislein and his older brother Liddell Beislein, who are very pivotal players in this, both go on trial because they didn't accept a plea deal with prosecutors, and I think prosecutors are going to throw the book at these two guys. And then most of Sam's female followers have taken plea deals, and three of them have already been sentenced to prison. And they were probably the most sympathetic and least culpable. And I think it shows that this judge, Susan Brnovich, who's we've been impressed with.
Yeah, I feel like she's not just taking this seriously, but she's also putting it in the context of the overarching history of the FLDS Church. So
Which you've got to.
you have to understand
And
it's
this,
a network, or we heard it described as a spider web the other day,
yeah,
which is,
and
I feel like, a very good representation of like the Warren Jeffs, the Samuel Batemans, all these prophets. They're all linked.
You make a really good point that we've talked about. It's my impression, my feeling, having covered this for as long as people who drop in and just do these as episodes really don't do a terrific job covering the story because you can't really cover this story if you don't know the history.
Yeah, yeah. The history is definitely a critical part. But in context with it, Sam reached out to you, you met him, people were already kind of red flags, kind of putting
Oh,
up,
more than that. You
talking.
just
Yeah.
the chronology is interesting, and now and we've Dylan and I just recently returned from Colorado City and in Hilldale and had probably one of the most interesting experiences I've had going up there hundreds of times. Didn't you find that last trip?
Oh, it was fascinating. And obviously, I never saw Colorado City and Hilldale when it was in the peak of the FLDS
You
control,
heard it
like you did.
You heard it around the dinner table
Yeah,
every
I've
time I
heard
came
it.
home.
I've heard it, and we've driven through when it was. But I now seeing it and how much it's changed just from like what I've known about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy,
It's
and
two different places.
it's completely
night
different.
and day.
And we've been working on some things with a local news station that might air later this week, and we really highlight the change in the town and the dynamic. And I feel like the Sam Bateman perfectly shows how much this town has changed.
Amen.
Because it was people within the town, former FLDS members and FLDS members currently of Warren, who really sounded the alarm and were like, this guy is crazy. FBI, law enforcement, like, get involved. This is not okay. And so I feel like the town that was once controlled by it is now like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. And it's really an incredible story in that regard.
Yeah, and I hope if we get this thing on the air here this week, we'll send out an alert. But fascinating drama in that the town has completely changed. The walls are down. All of the public office holders are not FLDS.
There's a female mayor.
There's a female mayor, which is
awesome.
which was extraordinary. That never. I mean, that symbolically speaks volume. We went to the famous Edge of the World Brewery, which has become sort of emblematic of.
You can bar hop there now.
Funniest thing, they've now got two brew pubs. Yeah. They've got a winery.
Maybe the other is just a bar.
And two breweries.
Oh,
that new bar. Yes. Their new bar right next to Colorado City town offices, which is hysterical. And I went in, and one of the old timers who used to be a follower of Jeff's and is now a friend of mine. We go in there when we're in there, and he says one of the most funny lines to me that tells you how much this place has changed. He said, "First time in the Crick's history, we can actually go bar hopping." And if people know the history, they understand how funny that sort of is.
Yeah. Well, we hope we've kept them up to date enough on the history that they can at least laugh at that. But it's not all fun and games.
No, and that's why I'm glad we went up and did the story, because I've been going in and out of there for the better part of 4 decades. And most of the times when I'm doing stories, it's in a very unflattering light because it's about Warren
Mhm.
in the context of the sort of cult craziness. So I've done so many stories on this place that I granted did not cast them in a particularly flattering light.
No.
And so it was fun to go back and I hope and tell the story that this place ain't like that anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really was people who got kicked out by Warren who then got an opportunity to
Mhm.
come back when a court took over the land and they were given up. So you really had this swell of people who got booted out and were understand how crazy and bad it was. And now they're in control and they're saying, we're gonna forge our own destiny now.
Yeah. So there's definitely been a lot of progress made in this story in its history, but there also is just still a very dark side. There's still children and women
Oh
being
yeah.
abused
Well, it's
and even
Sam.
male followers being abused. It's just a lot of
Totally. And you
tough.
saw that in the Sam thing, how utterly
It just was utterly twisted.
well, yeah, and this guy got see one of the things that people can talk about, and so let's make sure our audience understands that we got pulled into this story 2.5 years ago.
Mhm.
We have been preparing for this moment to cover these upcoming legal proceedings for the last 2.5 years, and since you know I got the call. I contacted people immediately, and they immediately told me Arizona's Department of Child Services or whatever. They've already been notified.
Mhm.
The FBI's hadn't been notified. I call every law enforcement agency in Mojave County and Washington County immediately after my encounter, and then called the FBI. And I dealt with them for many years. And I said, I understand you guys are not going to confirm or deny whether you have an investigation going. But I just had this interaction with this gentleman by the name of Samuel Bateman. And it's my opinion that if you're not investigating him, you should be. And I made that, this is what I told the FBI in early January of
Mhm.
2022. Sam doesn't get busted, but after our interaction, we both were just sort of waiting. This guy's so flamboyant and such a nut and going out and seeking attention that he's going to go. We knew, I
Yeah.
knew, and I think when we did our research on this, we both knew that
Yeah.
the day that Sam was going to blow in, and we've actually told other journalist friends of ours that keep an eye out because Sam Bateman is going to hit the headlines.
And that brings us to another great point is what to expect during this trial,
Yeah.
these upcoming trials of all these different defendants. But obviously, we're going to hear from a whole slew of witnesses. The
100
witness list was like 107. Yeah.
71 people,
Yeah.
lots of FBI,
Whether they
lots of
get all of
cops.
them or
They're
not.
not going to.
Wasn't Warren Jeffs? Warren
Warren
Jeffs was on
Jeffs
the
was
list.
put on the witness list. And let
So
me tell you, this would be, I think, the fourth courtroom that I've ever shared quality time, if he makes it to this thing.
that'd be interesting if they bring
And
him out of
his
prison for this.
and his behavior in court is almost always bizarre. So I'm hoping that actually they bring Warren in because that could only
Yeah.
make it more interesting.
Yeah, but another interesting part about what to expect with the witnesses is that there was a couple and they started doing a documentary on him. And Sam
Right.
had reached out and was very flamboyant, as we've mentioned before, like obviously wanted attention, wanted to meet the Queen of England, wanted to meet the journalist who's been on his old prophet's case for however long. So it's weird. He's really chasing down the spotlight.
Yes.
And this couple was doing a documentary and they
And they're
started.
friends of ours. They're people that we have worked with in the past, and I know them. And I
Yes,
know
they're
their
not
work.
affiliated with Sam in any way. I want to make
Yeah,
that
and
very
then not with
clear.
any religion.
No
They run a small
production.
they run a small charitable organization
Yes.
that helps people. And there's a whole slew of charities up there that are now helping people. I think some of them do good work, and some of them I I think seem a little suspect.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we've worked with these folks before. They do work to help some of the members of the community who have sort
Mhm.
of been, on the fringes and been damaged by all this. But they also run they have a production crew and they're journalists and or documentary makers. And so this couple gets acquainted with Sam because they're up there, and he basically invites them
Mhm.
into his house. So the
Like the
video
Real Housewives of Polygamy, it was like that's what he wanted from this, and
that
he
apparently is what Sam
he
wanted.
wanted like all
He wanted.
access, wanted to show the world what he was doing. He was just, seemed very proud of it,
Oh
which is
yeah,
just
and I know that the timetable of the in this thing again. we get contacted in late 2021. We do research and find out that lots of people, and then we found this out when we recently, lots of people were sounding the alarm
Yeah.
on Sam way before I did.
Mhm.
Family members of the women and children involved who'd left, they were calling the Arizona Children Protection people.
Mhm.
We know that they had contact with it, but Sam, they just denied everything, and for whatever reason, they need evidence.
Yeah.
But the
But this
mayor,
crew also was sounding the alarm too, who was
yeah, and
inside.
that is a really important note, because I
Really
think people
important.
have said, "What are these? Why were these people in there
In there
shooting?"
not doing anything about it. They were informing, they were
That
giving
is
their
certainly our
video.
understanding.
Yeah, their video is supposed to be a very key piece of evidence in this trial, and
And
they're both
that's
witnesses, so
yeah,
it should be interesting
yeah,
to when they introduce
and
that.
we, they're gonna, I'm sure, get some spotlight in the.
Mhm.
But there's just the really interest, just the thing to look for is much of this federal case is going to be based this documentary cruise video, and we've spoken to them, and they indicate that they, as soon as they started shooting this, they started getting suspicions and dropped the dime, and stayed sort of embedded, and that's a loaded term, but they stayed basically inside
They were kind
Sam's
of like
family
undercover.
with his blessing. But at that point, they indicate that they're now collecting evidence. I don't believe they didn't get group sex, or that they would
No.
have blown that up. But Sam was opening his family up to this crew, and much of that video is going to be the basis of federal
And
prosecutors'
Sam
case.
actually got mad that they weren't posting the videos they had taken on YouTube. That's what he wanted. Every day he wanted them to come in, film something,
And they
post it on
wouldn't.
YouTube, and they wouldn't. They were like, "No, this is not okay. We need
Well,
to
they didn't
gather."
say that to
They didn't
Sam,
say
but
that to him. They were kind of undercover in a
this is,
way.
and
Like they were
again,
undercover for the FBI. They obviously had an access that
well,
not
and
many
again,
people.
I think they
I
were
don't think
in
they were
there.
working.
Yeah,
I'm
they,
trying to make that like I'm saying like they were kind of undercover in a way once they
oh,
figured out like this is
I think
bad.
that's safe to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, and we're hoping that we can talk to some of these folks, and let them tell their own story
Hmm.
in their own words.
Definitely. We don't want to speak for
There's a lot
anybody.
of moving parts to this story, but I know that these folks did gain access, did shoot a great deal of video that they've obviously allowed federal prosecutors to utilize.
Hmm.
I think willingly in this case, and so that's gonna. And you were saying Sam was desperate for attention. I mean, all of these polygamous prophets and all these guys who use they all want power, they all want money, and they all want sex.
Hmm.
Sammy's fatal fourth rail, if you will, was that he also wanted fame, and that's
Yeah.
what. And Sam's stupid,
Yeah.
because the sad truth is, if he hadn't been as flamboyant and driving around in Bentleys, and there's all kinds of just rich details of this, but if he hadn't done this, the sad truth is he could have still probably gathered up a following, and he could be off in some
Oh,
remote corner of
absolutely.
Utah or Arizona doing this now.
Still doing
But
this.
Sam went out and said, "Look at me."
Mhm.
And after this crew that was shooting inside his family, he got frustrated with them, uh, according to them, that because they wouldn't post stuff on the internet, TikTok.
Yeah.
So, according to one of the family members of the victims, a young man that we've spoken to,
Yeah, he talked about the
Worth Beisley.
influencer
And
era.
apparently, Sam was very influenced by the influencer society and wanted to be that. He wanted the real life polygamous housewives of Sam Bateman. He wanted a TV show or some internet presence with that as the theme, and showing what a great guy he is.
And influencers are huge right now, so he obviously
And he
pulled
and
from
Sam,
that.
yeah, and apparently he was all obsessed with that kind of thing. And we were really, I think, when he came down to visit us, we were really like his second choice.
Yeah.
He'd been working with his crew to make him famous, and it wasn't happening. So I
So
really
they
think
take the lowly journalist Mike
that, well,
Watkins,
but he did also say he was going to meet the Queen, which sort of
which
elevates my status a
elevates your
little bit.
status completely. But I don't know if I was the queen and I was grouped with you.
This is why I thought, the one part, Sam creeped me out from the beginning, but the one part that was like amusing to me is like, I got to keep listening to what this guy's saying, when he's told me that God had instructed him to meet Mike Watkins and the Queen of England.
Yeah.
He sort of hooked me a little bit there. I was going to hang up on the guy when he's begging for a meeting, but it was like, wow, that's creative.
Well, the queen did pass away
Yeah,
before.
well, she hadn't died at the time he made the call, so I told him at the time, hey, she's really old. I don't think she's going to leave. Oh, He had an answer for, oh, I think we've got connections and we're going to do something. The one thing Sam is, people talk to he's a smooth talker. He is a good con man because I can testify. He conned me into that meeting,
You
which,
had no idea the
which,
women and children would be there.
yeah,
You
and that,
thought you were going to meet this one person. You had no idea who he was.
and
Like, we had no reason to believe there was anything.
right, right, right. Well, I had plenty of reason to believe that he was sort of a crackpot.
Well, yeah, weirdo. Like,
And
why would he want to meet you?
and
But like,
that's and that's and I told him this. Are you
but then the
FLDS?
women showed up. So
Well,
like,
it
it's not
made it
like,
different. Made
yeah,
it different, and by his own admission, and we want to get this on the record. We sat through Sam's sentencing hearing, which is nauseating. But the judge, Susan Bernovich, basically read about 12, 15 pages of every crime that Sam had committed, and he had to say, "Yes, I did that." And it was just multiple rapes and sexual
it was
assaults on
terrible.
children and group
It was
sex. It
disgusting.
was disgusting. And there's just dozens and dozens of things that he admitted to: sexual assault and abuse and trafficking of children. He only pled guilty to two charges. Yeah, I think it's some trafficking and a kidnapping. But Sam is a confessed child rapist,
Hmm.
so not and so I don't feel really obliged to use the word alleged. He confessed to this stuff,
Yes.
so that's the guy we're dealing with. There's a lot of flamboyance. A lot of people are going to be covering this story. We think
Hmm.
the Dateline has got hot on this.
Yeah,
The
a
other
lot of
time, a
local
couple of the locals
stations.
have picked up on it. I think Netflix, the people that
Yeah.
we've worked with in the past, have been.
And we will continue to bring you coverage on our small platform, but our whole point is to get the story out, and more people that talk about it, the better. Like, there are kids, there are women, they're being
Right.
abused, and that's the moral of the story. At the end of the day, we just want to help spread the word to stop those abuses.
Precisely, and I'm glad that we were proactive in jumping out and notifying law enforcement. Not that they give a damn what we think, but I
The
felt it
more
was.
evidence you
But
get, the
well, and
better.
I just think
All evidence matters.
I want to be on the record that this guy came down to impress me.
Yeah.
He used me as a prop.
Yeah.
He used his family as a prop to impress them with me and to impress me with them. And he didn't impress me, Sam. And it makes my blood run cold. And I hope that justice is done in this matter. Uh, but that we think about why we've been doing this for the last 3 years, and I've been doing it for most of my life. That it's just there is a bottom line that I think exposing these guys is really important.
Hmm. And what's really, really important is, once you have exposed them, then not letting them communicate with the outside world, because they still have followers, they still have influence.
Look
We've
at
seen that
Warren.
with Warren. He's put out revelations. Kids have gone missing because of it. He has his doomsday plot, which we're 2.5 years into the 5-year plan.
Right.
There's just a danger when these guys can still communicate with their masses who don't necessarily believe that they have done anything wrong.
All the it's like fake news. We see this. Tell people that it's not true, and if they're
Say it
not
enough
willing,
times.
to do any sort of invest.
Anyway,
The
but
Yeah,
if he communicates with his
followers, that's
followers,
still going to be a
still a
problem.
problem.
Warren has issued revelations from his prison cell in Texas that I believe, we believe we've documented revelations that have inspired criminal activity on the part of
Absolutely.
our Heber Jeff story. You go back and look at our previous episodes, and the family members who were very concerned about the victims inside Sam's little group.
Hmm.
They all expressed the same fear. As long as Sammy wants to get in and recognize he's going to go to prison, so he
Yeah,
wants to get in. He's got a very tough lawyer who's going to try to get him the best deal he can now that he's already cut this deal. But
the
Sammy wants to
competency.
continue to communicate because every time Sam's behind bars, and he got locked up in Flagstaff after that pullover,
He's always doing something to
he's on the phone
communicate,
telling his followers to delete incriminating
conspiring,
evidence. He gets thrown in prison down in Florence, and he's immediately on these tablets in this prison
plotting a
pod
kidnap.
plotting the kidnapping that was successful. So Sam has, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Every time Sam's been behind bars, he's been orchestrating other crimes. The family members are very concerned that if Sammy continues to have his little con man voice in the ear of these susceptible people, we went up, and there's a couple of houses up in Colorado City that are
That
still,
belong to him.
well, are attached to him. I don't know. Sammy,
They're his groups.
his groups. He took property from all his male followers. So
He took everything.
he probably doesn't own them, but he's.
Wives,
And
children.
we went to one of them, and it was clear they're just full of people. We could
Oh
hear
yeah, we
them.
could hear people inside. They
And-
didn't answer, but
and they're women and followers, and there's a lot of children
yeah.
in those groups, and
Yeah.
this is the concern. And so Sammy can continue to manipulate people from even behind bars. He's a danger.
Yeah.
We are on this case. We've been on it for 2 years now, and now it's all coming to a head.
Yeah. So if you're still with us and you
Yeah.
haven't liked and subscribed or shared with your friends,
do that, please. And we want to take questions. If anybody
Yeah.
has any questions about Sam Bateman,
Yes.
about this trial, about the length and who was involved,
or just about anything in general,
Right,
we welcome the
right.
community. We want to build this. We
Yeah.
want to help this story. We want to get this out there.
right, and we're going to continue to monitor what we think is sort of the second rail of this story, and that's
Yeah.
Warren's revelation of gathering up children, and he's
Yes.
setting some doomsday clock for 5 years, and we're now 2 years into that. So what's happening there?
We'll keep you posted.
Yeah, lots to talk about. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been nice.
We haven't done
Lots
this for
going on.
about 3 months now, but again, we have been working behind the scenes.
Yeah, sorry we've been slacking with the YouTube, but we're back. We're trying to be good at being consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, signing off. I'm Dylan.
I'm Mike.
This is Story Hustler.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Bye, everyone.